Hey guys, how y'all doing today? What I'm going to do today is winterize my 15 horsepower. It's a Mercury 4-stroke outboard engine. It's an 03 model. This is our Avon. It's a 10.5 foot fiberglass bottom tender. This is a 02 model. The motor we actually bought brand new in 09, and it has very low hours on it. I would say maybe 10 at the very most. So the first thing I want to do is get it cleaned up really well, and the boat's filthy. We actually had a hurricane come through, or more of a tropical storm in our area, so we hauled the boat out early and it got full of leaves. So what we're going to do is I have a degreaser, and I'm going to spray it all down and give it a good cleaning once we pump it. Alright, so I'm going to coat the motor really well, and I'm going to let it sit for a couple minutes, and then we'll get her all cleaned off. So the motor's all cleaned off nice. So the next step is I want to run the motor for a couple minutes to warm it up, and we'll get the oil changed in it. So the freshwater intake for the motor is just right above the propeller here. And what I have is a set of ear muffs, and I'm going to clamp those on, and with this motor, because the intake's underneath, I'm going to have to slide it on this way, and that's how it's going to get the fresh water. Now this motor's run in fresh water, so there's no salt in it. So the earmuffs are all installed. Now doing it this way, make sure it doesn't get put in gear, forward or reverse. It's got to stay in neutral. If not, you'll chop the earmuffs off. What I'll do is let this run until the water starts getting warm, and it's getting warm now. Fire on my camera. Anyways, in order to extract the oil from an outboard motor, 4-stroke, you need an oil extractor. So this is the model we have. It's a Pella 6000 oil extractor. So the first step is you need to take out the dipstick, and this oil should be nice and clean. And what we're going to do is take the hose from the oil extractor, and we're going to put it right in the dipstick hole right there. And make sure it gets to the bottom, and you want to lift it a little bit up, a tiny bit. If not, it won't suck very good. So it's at the bottom, so I'm just going to pull it up a millimeter or two. And with the oil extractor, what you have to do is pump this up and down till the oil starts coming out through the engine, into the tube, into your catch basin of your extractor. So the oil is going through, into there. Now it shouldn't take too long. These don't hold a whole lot of oil. So we'll let that go till it's empty, and then we'll top it up. Alright, so the oil's all out, and you know, because you'll hear it starting to suck on this end. That's going into your motor, and then you'll hear a little bit of gurgling, and that means it's empty. So I've cleaned the dipstick off and put it back in, and on the back of the motor take off the yellow cover right here, and this is where you're going to put the oil in. And I'm using a Quaker State 10W30. It calls for 10W30 in our temperature, and so we'll put it right in there. So the oil's all changed and topped up. Again, check your dipstick a few times while you're adding oil there, and you want to make sure you don't overfill it or underfill it. Again, all motors take different amounts of oil depending on what your maker model is. So just make sure you put the proper amount of oil in, and again, I used a Quaker State 10W30, and I also just changed the oil filter. And I used a Mercury Oil Filter. There's the part number. You have a Mercury 15 horsepower. And always make sure when you change your oil filter, again these are similar to a screw on screw off automotive filter, just remember to make sure that the old gasket comes off and you don't double gasket. A lot of people do that on their vehicles. If you do that, then it will start leaking. So it's got a new oil filter and the oil's been changed. This also has a fuel filter. Now this fuel filter is like brand new, so I'm not going to bother changing that this year. The next step that I do every year, it's called a fogging oil. It's rust prevention. What you do with this is you put an end on the canister, and you want to spray this in through your intake. What will happen, it will go through your carburetor, and what this does, it lubricates all your internal mechanisms in your motor as well as your cylinder walls. So I will spray this in. I'll start the motor up and spray this in till it stalls out. Alright, so I finished fogging the motor. Again, there's the fogging spray, and again I put the red nozzle on it and had the nozzle up underneath the air intake. And what you do is start the motor, just let it idle, and you keep spraying till you start getting a little bit of smoke coming out from the back, and the motor will eventually stall. And I've done this every year, and knock on wood, I haven't had any issues. I've done this with 2-stroke and 4-stroke. So the last thing that I do every year before I put it away in storage, because it is stored in my garage, which it's warmer in there than it is outside. However, it does get below -20 and a little bit damp every once in a while, is I like to spray some rust preventive spray on all the mechanical parts, all on the outside of your carburetor, your intake. Just make sure it's cool, and that way it just protects any corrosion from moisture over the winter time. So I'll give it a little spray. So what I'll be using, it's Lloyd's, similar to a WD-40. It's just a penetrating lubricant. All it does is puts a fine little mist of oil on top of the metal surfaces. And again, a lot of this will evaporate. And as you can see, it just protects the surface. Now with this type, it says it doesn't harm plastic or rubber, so I'm not too concerned about it getting on the rubber. If it is a little heavy in some spots, I will just dab it with a cloth. Careful with these motors, they do run with a belt underneath the plastic cover there, so just make sure you're not spraying the plastic belt. Alright, so you're all done underneath the hood. And again, I should mention too, when I fog the motor, I don't have the water running. It's only running for about maybe 10 seconds max. And what that will do too, any water in the motor too, when you're fogging it, it will disperse the water. You don't want water sitting in your motor. Now my next step is I'm going to grease all the grease points with the marine grease. So there's a few on this, so I'm going to grease those up. So the motor's been all greased. There's one there, and on the other side of the motor there's one right there and one up there. That one you have to have the motor tilted up in order to grease that one. So one of the last steps, you want to drain the old gear oil in the bottom part of the motor, your outdrive. So you want to take the plug out here, and the top it's draining out. It's coming out the top a little bit just because it's on an angle a little. So you want to let this drain out. Now you don't want to see it white and milky like that. What that means is I'm going to need new gaskets on my drain plugs here. So I'll have to put new gaskets on. So what I want to do is get this all flushed out with all this old gear oil. So I installed some new O-ring gaskets on the lower end for the two plugs there. That's the part number. And again, there's the oil filter. The gaskets are 454, the oil filter is at 1050. Alright, so I just showed you the part number for your gaskets. So I changed the lower end fluid. Again, it's 10W90. That's what I use there. I've been using that for years without any issues. And it's 80W90, and that's a gear oil. So in order to change the gear oil, you take out both screws, you put the motor down, you let it drain out, and then you put the top of the gear oil container in the bottom, and you start squirting it till it starts coming out the top. Then you put the plug in the top first, and then you put the bottom one in. It's a little tricky. It's definitely a two-hand. And it seems like quite a few steps in order to winterize your motor. However, it is nice and easy. It takes about 15-20 minutes. So last but not least, before I put it away, I'll put a nice fresh coat of wax on the engine, and then it will be ready to be stored for the winter time. And again, I put it in my garage where it's nice and dry. However, you do get a little bit of moisture with the temperature changes. That's why I like to make sure everything's done to it and the oil sprayed underneath the engine cover and any little cables and whatnot. And again, I'll wax it and take it off and put it in the garage so it's all set. And it's a nice warm day out, so it's nice and dry, so it will be going away dry. Again, guys, if you have any questions or comments, make sure you post them below. If not, thanks for watching.